So let's read this passage, and this is a CAT 2017 passage. We have the questions on the right hand side and the passage on the left hand side. We will read the passage first. It's a slightly long passage. So in CAT 2017, we had two short passages having three questions each, and then we had around three long passages having six questions each. So in all, we had 24 questions coming from the RCs, and two passages short and three long passages. So let's this was one of the passages. Let's read the passage. It says the end of the age of the internal combustion engine is in sight. There are small signs everywhere. The shift to hybrid vehicles is already underway among manufacturers. Volvo has announced it will make no purely petrol engine cars after 2019, and Tesla has just started selling its first electric car aimed squarely at the middle classes. The Tesla 3 sells for $35,000 in the US, and 400,000 people have put down a small refundable deposit towards one. Several thousand have already taken delivery, and the company hopes to sell 500,000 over next year. This is a remarkable figure for a machine with a fairly short range and a very limited number of specialized charging stations. So the author has introduced the idea of the electric engine, and he has said that the electric cars would now is the future. I mean, he is introducing that hybrid vehicles are already underway, and the introduction, the first paragraph talks about hybrid vehicles, electric. No purely petrol engine cars, Tesla, and all these things have come in the first paragraph. Now, in the second paragraph, it says some of it reflects the remarkable abilities of Elon Musk, the company's founder, as a salesman, engineer, and a man able to get the most out of his factory workers and the governments he deals with. Mr. Musk is selling a dream that the world wants to believe in. So it says Mr. Musk is selling a dream that the world wants to believe in. Correct? So again, Elon Musk and Tesla has come in the second paragraph, and they have come because of the author's discussion about hybrid vehicles. This last may be the most important factor in the story. So this last refers to the part that has come here. He says that the government he deals with, Mr. Musk, is selling a dream that the world wants to believe in, and this last may be the most important factor in the story. The private car is a device of immense practical help and economic significance, but at the same time a theater for myths of unattainable self-fulfillment. The one thing you will never see in the car advertisement is traffic, even though that is the element in which drivers spend their lives. Every single driver in a traffic jam is trying to escape from it, yet it is the inevitable consequence of mass car ownership. The sleek and swift electric car is at one level merely the most contemporary fantasy of autonomy and power, but it might also disrupt our exterior landscape nearly as much as the fossil fuel engine car did the last century. So the author is comparing the electric car with the fossil fuel car. So the author says that the sleek, swift electric car is at one level merely the most contemporary fantasy of autonomy and power, but it might also disrupt our exterior landscapes nearly as much as the fossil fuel engine car did in the last century. Electrical cars would, of course, pollute far less than fossil fuel driven ones. Instead of oil reserves, the rarest materials for batteries would make undeserving despots and their dynasties fantastically rich. Petrol stations would disappear. The air in cities would once more be breathable and their streets as quiet as those of Venice. This isn't an unmixed good. Cars that were as silent as bicycles would still be as dangerous as they are now. So again, electric versus fossil fuel car has been compared in this paragraph. And then he later says that the dream goes further than that. The electric cars of the future will be so thoroughly equipped with sensors and reaction mechanisms that they will never hit anyone. Just as brakes don't let you skid today, the steering wheel of tomorrow will swerve you away from danger before you have noticed it. This is where the fantasy of autonomy comes full circle. The logical outcome of cars which need no driver is that they will become cars which need no owner either. Instead, they will work as taxis do, summoned at will but only for the journeys we actually need. This the future towards which Uber is working. The ultimate development of the private car will be to reinvent public transport. Traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes a public entity. What then will happen to our fantasies of independence? We will all have to take the electrically powered bicycles. So, if you read the passage, the author starts with hybrid vehicles by introducing Tesla and Volvo, and then Elon Musk in the next paragraph, and then talks about, and then he moves in a different direction. He says that the private car is a device of immense practical help, but at the same time, a theater of myths of unattainable self-fulfillment. So this theater for myths of unattainable fulfillment becomes the core discussion in the subsequent paragraph. It says the one thing you will never see in the car is this and that, and then yet it is the inevitable consequence of mass car ownership. The sleek and swift car is one level, but it will also distort our exterior landscape. Electric cars would of course pollute far less, right? And then petrol stations would disappear. This isn't a mixed good. Cars that were as silent as bicycles would still be dangerous as they are now to anyone they hit without audible warning. So again, he's pointing where exactly things are going. Then he says the dream goes further than that. The electric cars of the future will be so thoroughly equipped with sensors that they will never hit anyone. And then he talks about this is where the fantasy of autonomy comes full circle. So he says that the logical outcome of cars which need no driver is that they will become cars which need no owner either. Instead, they will work as taxis do. So the author says the fantasy of autonomy which prompted you to buy a car, first a fossil fuel driven car, then an electric car, will come full circle. Why? Because the logical outcome is that if the car becomes so perfect, then you don't need driver. And when the car does not need driver, there is no need of owner either. Instead, they will work as taxis do. This is the future towards which Uber is working. The ultimate development of the private car will be to reinvent public transport. Traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes a public utility. What will happen to our fantasies of independence then? So eventually, if there is no driver, then there is no owner, then there is no ownership. So you'll find that the car becomes a public utility, and only then traffic would be abolished. Then what will happen to your fantasy of independence, of owning the car? And then the author sarcastically says that we will all have to take to electrically powered bicycles. This is a sarcasm, because you will have to. You had that fantasy of ownership, right? The autonomy. But if there is no driver, there is no owner, then what will happen to your fantasy of autonomy? So it will come full circle. And then eventually what you would do, you will have to take to electrically powered bicycles. So this is the sarcasm with which the author, this is the paragraph. So the author seems to be talking not exactly or precisely about only electric cars and how they are better than fossil fuel driven cars. I mean, that is just one part of the story. The author seems to be focusing more on the idea of autonomy and what that idea of autonomy technically means, right? So let's go ahead and take the questions. So the first question here we have, which of the following statements best reflects the author's argument? So we have 4 choices, and let's look at the one which reflects the author's argument. Option A says that hybrid and electric vehicles signal the end of the age of internal combustion engine. So looks good in the sense that yes, hybrid and electrical vehicles, this is what the author seems to be discussing. Elon Musk is not the focus of the paragraph. The future car, Uber car will be, so again the future Uber car and Elon Musk are small ideas of the bigger picture. So you have to choose between A and C. A says that hybrid and electrical vehicles signal the end of the age of internal combustion engine, and C says the private car represents an undeniable myth of independence. Now the point here is that the author is not discussing just hybrid and electric vehicles. What he is driving at is basically that the private car represents an unattainable myth of independence. Now you might be surprised with the answer, but understand which of the following statements best reflects the author's argument. So the author has said that once the electric car or the hybrid car comes into picture, then what will happen to your dream of independence, right? So he says the dream goes further than that. And then he says that the private car is a device of immense practical help and economic significance, but at the same time a theater for myths of unattainable self-fulfillment. So so what he's trying to say is that if you gradually move through the passage, though he's discussing electric cars, but he's not saying that electric cars are the best and hybrid cars are the best. They will have lots of advantages. They will have this, they will have that. The dream goes further than that. This is where the fantasy of autonomy comes full circle. So if you look at this, then he says, what then will happen to our fantasies of independence? We will all have to take to electrically powered bicycles. So in a way, he wants to tell us that the private car represents an unattainable myth of independence. Because the private car is not just about the fossil fuel car, because the fossil fuel car will give way to the electrical, to hybrid cars, and then gradually the electric car. And then gradually you will have driverless car, and then you will have ownerless car, and then you will have the car which becomes a public transport. So what is happening to your myth of independence? Nothing. You will have to go for a electrically powered bicycle. So this is the direction in which the author's argument seems to be moving. So though he starts with hybrid and electric vehicles, this is not the end of it. From hybrid and electric vehicles, he moves to driverless car. Then he moves to, ownerless car. And then he says that this is what Uber is driving at. The car becomes a public utility. So what will happen to your ownership? What will happen to the idea of, the autonomy? And then the author says that C is the best choice and the right answer because it reflects the core argument. Whereas hybrid electric vehicles is just a small part of the argument. The passage is not focusing on hybrid electric vehicles and how they are they have more advantages over the fossil fuel cars. Second question. So answer for the first question is C. Let's go and take the next one. The author points out all of the following about electric cars except. So their reliance on rare materials for batteries will support despotic rule. They will reduce air and noise pollution. They will not decrease the number of traffic jams. They will ultimately undermine rather than further driver autonomy. So now if you look at this, it says they will ultimately undermine. So it says that they will undermine rather further. So undermining driver autonomy basically means giving them less autonomy. Now the point is, if you look at the passage here, it categorically says that the dream goes further than that. Right? So it says the electric cars of the futures will be so thoroughly equipped with sensors and reaction mechanisms that they will never hit anyone. Just as brakes don't let you skid today, the steering wheel of tomorrow will serve you away from danger before you have noticed it. So what is happening here? The freedom of the driver is increased. See, when you say freedom, it basically means less of engagement, more of being free. So autonomy here means freedom, right? So if electric cars come, then what will happen? The electric cars of the future, right? So because if you look at the paragraph, it says the electric cars of the future. So the electric cars of the future, will they undermine the autonomy or will they further the autonomy? If you imagine it that way, suppose if I'm a driver and I have to be very cautious all the time, I can't use the phone, I can't afford to get distracted while driving the car. So is it undermining my freedom or is it really furthering my freedom? So you just say it is undermining your freedom because you are constantly occupied in the driving. And that is the reason why you have no freedom to do anything else. You can't relax. You can't afford to get distracted. So this definitely is not what electric cars will have. The author points out all of the following about electric cars except. So you have to mark for the one that is except. Now you might wonder, sir, where do we see the other things? They will definitely reduce noise pollution. They will not decrease the number of traffic jams. Here it is clearly given that traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes a public utility. Otherwise, traffic jams will always be there. That means traffic jams will be abolished only means in no other case except this. So whether you have electric cars or not, traffic jams will always be there. So that means that traffic jams will be there in spite of the electric cars. So they will not decrease traffic jams. Very true, because from this we can infer that traffic jams will be abolished only when the private car becomes public utility. That means this will not abolish traffic jams or decrease traffic jams because the condition of traffic jams is given and that's the only condition. So B and C both can be eliminated because they are true and you have to mark for the except. And A says their reliance on rare materials for batteries will support despotic rule. This too is given. It is given here that that the rarest materials for batteries would make undeserving despots and their dynasties fantastically rich. And this is for electrical cars, right? So we have this too as well. So A also is given. So you have to choose D by default. There is no other option because D is nowhere given. And secondly, you will say, sir, if the driver I mean, most of you take this option negatively. You say that the driver is not focusing much on the driving activity, so you are actually not taking his freedom away. Are you getting my point? So the idea is undermining freedom basically means that the electric car will actually take away the freedom of the driver autonomy. No, it is not taking away the freedom. It is giving them the freedom because lots of things would be done automatically. So the driver would be free. He would have more autonomy as to how he wants to take things. So we have to understand autonomy not in the sense of how much you have the liberty to do what you want, rather how much freedom you have from the other things. So it will not undermine the autonomy, it will actually increase the autonomy because of technology. So D is the best choice and the right answer. According to the author, the main reason for Tesla's remarkable sales is that. So we have the options here and we have to pick Tesla's remarkable sales. And it is given here clear, and this is where the passage becomes very important. You have to always go with reference to the passage. Even in the earlier question, when I said that A, B and C are visible, then they are visible. And D is not visible. Why? Because the opposite of D is visible. And similarly, when you come to this, it says this last may be the most important factor in the story. What kind of story are you referring to? It says here that Mr. Musk is, it reflects the remarkable ability. So what reflects? So the author says that 4 lakh people have put down a small amount. Several thousands have already taken delivery and the company hopes to sell 500,000 more next year. This is a remarkable figure for a machine that with a fairly short range and a very limited number of specialized charging stations. Some of it reflects the remarkable. So the author says that this is a remarkable figure. Some of it reflects the remarkable abilities of Elon Musk. So the sales which has come up reflects the remarkable abilities of Elon Musk. And Mr. Musk is selling a dream that the world wants to believe in. This last may be the most important factor. So this last is the most important factor in the success of Elon Musk. And that is what? That he's selling a dream which the world wants to believe in. Correct? So if I go here, I have to pick that according to the author, the main reason for Tesla's remarkable sales is that the company is rapidly upscaling. No, people believe in autonomy. Of course, the autonomy part is the most important idea because it is clearly given here that he's selling a dream that the world wants to believe in. Right? This last may be the most important factor. The private car is a device of immense practical help, but at the same time a theater of myths of unattainable self-fulfillment. So this unattainable self-fulfillment is the major reason. And the option says that people believe in the autonomy represented by God. Self-fulfillment and autonomy are the two things. So if you look at the option, cost effective, no more given. Because 35,000 cost is given here, $35,000, but it is not implied that this is going to be cheap or expensive than the other subsidy. Again, it has not come. The company is rapidly upscaling. I mean, there are fewer charging stations. So where is the upscaling factor coming in here? So and the author has categorically said here, see, when something is clearly visible, there should be no obstinacy with respect to not accepting it. He's selling a dream that the world wants to believe in. The private car is a device of immense practical help, but at the same time a theater of myths of unattainable self-fulfillment. So unattainable self-fulfillment in the sense that autonomy, self-fulfillment is basically the freedom to believe. So it is this autonomy that is represented by private cars that is basically being mentioned as the reason why Tesla is doing so well. And the others have gone out because there is not even a shred of evidence for the others. Take the 4th question now. In the paragraph 5 and 6, the author provides the example of Uber to argue that Uber will outstrip Tesla sales. Uber is not a car manufacturing company. In the future, traffic jams will not exist. So C is the right answer. In the future, the private car will be transformed into a form of public transport. This is what the example comes here. The ultimate development of the private car will be to reinvent public transport. This is the future towards which Uber is working. And what is the future? That the private car would be public transport. So traffic jams. See, the example of Uber is not. See, Uber has nothing to do with traffic jams, because the traffic jams will not exist whether Uber comes into picture or Ola comes into picture. So the point here is that the reason why Uber has come is to the Uber's idea of making a private car a public utility. That is the idea of Uber. Traffic jams will be a consequence of that. That once the private car becomes a public utility, then traffic jams will not be there. So who is making that private car public utility? It can be Uber, it can be Ola, it can be anyone. The point that he's trying to make is that Uber's idea of making private car a public utility, this will in the future ensure that traffic jams won't exist. So Uber is connected with option C and not with option B. Option B is a mere consequence of that. So we have option C as the best choice and the right answer. A slightly difficult passage because the options are not very clear to us. But always go by elimination and you will realize that the right answer is indeed the right answer.